Hello everyone. Today I'm going to discuss scope in JavaScript. So scope is it's the best way to understand it is just to think of it as the context of when you use the keyword this. And the keyword this represents just the most local inner scope, and when there is no other, like anything that you're nested inside of, like a function or an object, this will always reference the window, at least in a browser if you're programming for a browser. And a good example of that, of the most global scope, and you'll hear that word thrown around a lot, global scope, it just references the most outer scope, which is the window, the browser window. So what I've done here is just console logged the keyword this, and what you see here is obviously window, a reference to the window. So, but let's make another example, and I've written another example down here. Go ahead and do this. So it's really actually a simple concept, but it can get a little confusing because of the way it's phrased using the keyword this. It sounds more complex than it is, but I'm telling you, you have nothing to worry about. In fact, this example here is a really good way of understanding it. So here I'm using the keyword this, which, if you're not familiar with objects, I'll have a link to understanding JavaScript objects in this video at the bottom. So for now, I'll assume that you are familiar with objects, which are even easier to understand. If you can understand, if they're just so easy that follow the link to the other video and you'll be fine. Just come back to this tutorial, and it'll just take you a second to get back up to speed. Anyways, when we use the keyword this, we're saying, hey, JavaScript, get the most local scope. And in this case, it's going to look at the object, and it's going to say, hey, I need to get the length property for this object. So it will go and it'll console log this dot length. In fact, one of the things I love about this editor is that it can pick up on the scope of things and of objects or properties and highlight all the instances of them. So when I say this dot length and I click on it, you can see that it references this right here. So notice I'm using the keyword this, but the keyword, if I were to console log this outside of the function, outside of this, it's another scope. So let me see if I can draw this real quick. Let's see if I can just use this. So one way of thinking of it is, this is the window. So when you're outside of this, outside of anything, this will always reference the browser. But then say you create a function, right? And so then what you're doing, or create an object, I should say. You have a function as well. You can do it in functions. What you're going to be referencing is this new scope, this guy right here. And then if you create like an object inside of it, so basically it's a series of nested scopes. And so in that sense, it's pretty easy. Where it might get complicated later on is when we're talking about closures, but that's a little bit more advanced topic, and we don't need to get into that right now. But what I do want you to understand, and it's going to help you a lot, is to understand scope, because we're going to be doing some things that are kind of cool that require you to understand how scope works. So I wish this was a little more interactive. I would ask you, does anybody understand the difference between the scope out here and the scope in here? Because out here is the browser window, in here it's the object, and if I were to create yet another object, so say other object is this, and then this other object had a let's see, what do I call it, an add function. I would say I'll call it add2. Say return 2 plus value. But if I was to, or have another property here, start I could do this. Let me just set it up real quick. You can see that here I have another scope, and when I say the new scope is this new object here. So if I use the keyword, again, what you really want to look out for is the word this, and that all that's saying is find the most local scope. It's just the most inner scope. So if I was I'm gonna do my fancy drawings again. So, and that would be my son crying in the background if you hear him. He doesn't want to eat his dinner. Anyways, so if this is the browser window, and this is an object, and here is another object, and here is another object. Yeah, my circles are awesome. Anyways, wow, that's really bad. Anyways, whenever you use the keyword this, so if you use it in this context, in here, then this means this area. Let me get another color. I'm going to get a little Bob Ross here, and be like this. It references this area in here. Okay, and so if you use the keyword, let's see, let's use a new color. A blue pen. If you use the keyword this inside of here in the blue area, you're actually referencing this area. This is the scope, and so it's just saying if you want to visualize it as a boundary, scopes have boundaries. It's just gonna get the most the kind of like the nearest ring of the donut, if you will. That's if you have nested objects. If you don't have any objects at all, then your default scope is always going to be the browser window if you're programming for the browser. You can use, obviously, with like Node, you can program for server-side stuff now, but we won't get into that. I'm assuming most of you are just programming for the browser right now. Anyways, so remember, the keyword this, all it's saying is find the most inner scope that is available to you right now. So it would be like this level here. And here it would be this level, from this level out. See, this is kind of like an inner level, so it would be like, I might be beating a dead horse here, but this area here is that. Let's see, we have one more. Alright, I think you understand. If you don't understand, please leave a comment. I will try to be more clear on this, but you can see really what the most important part is in this really basic example is that this is a with local reference. Alright, I'm definitely beating a dead horse. But let's move on to example that is a little better, that shows you how we can leverage this, okay? Because that's what's going to be really important. There's some really great tricks that you can do once you understand how to inject scope. So, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So there's this little thing that all functions have. There's two methods. One's called call, and one is called apply. So I'm going to just create a quick function here. I'm going to call it my function. Actually, we like to abbreviate it. Call it my function. We actually start with the keyword function, and we'll do this. We'll add a property to this dot length equals 0, and actually don't need this. So what it's gonna do, and then we'll return this dot. What we'll do is just return this dot length. We won't even set the length for it. We're just gonna return the length. But notice that, let me go ahead and delete this. Notice that this function doesn't have a length to it. I mean, we haven't specified it. Before, earlier, just a few seconds ago, we were doing this dot length equals 0, or say we can do 10, right? So it's very, very, very clear that if we were to say this dot length, it would just return 10. But one of the cool things we can do is we can override the scope, the meaning of the word this. So I'm going to create an object. My object equals that, and then length equals 400. Okay. But now I'm going to call this function right here, my func. I'm going to override what this means. So the way to do that is to go my func. Alright. Dot call, and rather than passing it, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it a reference to my object. So my object. Okay. So when this runs, because I'm using this, it's a hidden property or a hidden method of functions. This call method. There's also the apply, and there's I think there are a few more. When you call it with, well, it's kind of a nice name, call it. When you apply the function, or invoke it, I should say. There's so many semantics to like this, but I think you can get away with saying invoking, although I think technically people call it applying a function. In any case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say instead of looking at itself for a length property, it's going to go look into my object. I'm going to override this. Instead of saying here, I'm going to say it'll be as if I am saying my object. And that's what's cool about this, and I'll show you why in just a few seconds. So let's see if we can get away with it. And close my beautiful drawing. See how I need to console log it in order to see it. There we go. You see how I got the number 400? Now, suppose I was to call it without using the keyword call, and I was just to console.log my func. Actually, my func like this. I'm gonna get 0. Length is 0. So there is no length. But like I said, I can override this like I did here, and I'll get 400 for this one because it's looking at the property there. So it's cool because I can inject the meaning. I can override the meaning of the keyword this. And remember, this only means scope or context. So I'm injecting the context. I'm saying get the length of this object, which is the context now. So the only difference, and I want to be clear about this, the only difference between using call and apply, because we can use apply as well, is suppose we had a function that took arguments. So we said arg1 and arg2. You're thinking, well, how the heck do we pass arguments to it? Well, if we use apply, we can pass it as an array. We can use 1, 2, and we can console log console.log arg1. Let's see. Oh yeah, and this one it would be undefined. So let's just remove that. You can see that argument 1 is that, and let's make it a little bit nicer. And then say we'll do this one. Argument 2 and you can see 1, 2, 4. So that comes in really handy when you have a variable number of arguments you want to feed your function. But if it's a lot of arguments, this just seems to be an easier syntax. But if you want to just do it using call, you can do console. We're going to console log it, but myfunc.call, and we're going to use my object. The first argument to call and apply are both the context. So my object. And then you just separate everything with a comma. So we're going to do 50 or 25 and 75, and that'll do it. So that's the only difference, is that call always expects the first argument, or the first argument to be the context, and then everything else it's gonna pick up on, depending on how many other arguments you have. Everything separated by a comma, so you can say those must be, things to pass to the function we're actually calling. So that's the only difference. It's not a big difference, but it can be handy. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an interesting way of, here it is. Do I have enough time? No, this is 18 minutes. Okay, we've got some time. Okay, so the next part that we're going to do is we're going to actually do something really cool. And I actually took this example and be open about it. I actually borrowed it from John Ressig. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Anyways, he created jQuery, which you should have heard a lot about by now. And if not, I consider taking a look at it. Anyways, long story short, let's get down to the brass tacks here and do some business. We're going to leverage what we already know about using apply and call. In this case, we're actually just going to use call. We're going to create an object. Let's see. Let me run you through these through this example little bit by little bit. And minimize that. And okay, so let's get all this other stuff out of the way. So we're going to create a really basic object. We're going to give it a length property. We're going to give it an add function. Okay, or a property called add that is a function that we pass a value to. And what we want to do, now there's two ways. If we wanted to on every every call to this add function. If we wanted to add, well, okay, let me be very clear here. We're gonna actually treat this object like an array. So if there was a case where an array just wouldn't do the trick for us, we needed a few more properties that we wanted to add to it. We could do it this way. So this is a little bit more advanced. In fact, I think I should save it for another video. This has been 20 minutes, but I'll do it on another video.